Welcome to your Mental Health Matters podcast, a community-minded mental health podcast providing real-life mental health talks supporting parents, educators, and students.
Welcome to Season 1 of Your Mental Health Matters. Today's episode, we're talking about back to school. So we're talking about strategies for anxiety, emotional regulation, and readjusting to kind of the back to school routine. So we're going to be talking about some challenges of what back to school looks like in different age ranges, whether it be early the years, junior high, high school, even talking about some challenges of back to school, both for parents and teachers as well. I'm joined by my two incredible, amazing co-hosts. We've got Chantel and Mel here, back to chat about this topic. So interesting. You are the boots on the ground, and some of the other individuals that you lead in your schools really have been experiencing and uniquely journeying through the challenges that this back to school year presents. So we'll be talking about those challenges and then practically sharing our kind of wealth and wisdom of expertise as psychologists, as counselors, as those kind of overseeing counseling and inclusive supports in the schools. We'll be sharing some very practical supports and strategies, both for parents, stuff we can do to support our children, and perhaps some other universal strategies that could be used at school as well. So that's a lot to pack into 20 minutes. We promise we're going to do our best. Let's dive right in here, Chantel and Mel. What are you seeing as trends and as we look to get back to school this fall?
Well, I'm definitely seeing anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety, and it's not. The funny thing is it's in the parents as well.
Totally.
It's and I don't mean funny, haha, but It's stemming. They see it, they feel it. It's coming and trickling into the schools and the families and the teachers. The teachers feel the anxiety. They're picking up on it, and they're trying to regulate their classroom. So I would say anxiety is an all-encompassing topic, and it covers so much of what we need to in many, many areas. I feel anxiety will be a piece of it.
Yeah, so good. How about for yourself, Chantal? Similar, different themes?
Very similar. I think one of the challenges is the change in routine and that there's no parents in school, especially for the elementary students. Right. Parents would come into the school, pick up their kids, see their teacher at the end of the day. But that routine is very disrupted this year. It's a drop off outside, no parents inside. So those shifts in routine has really disrupted the routine of it, I guess, and what that expectation is, and it's completely shifted. So I think that has increased parents' anxiety as well as kids' anxiety. So that's kind of what I'm seeing with the younger kids. And then with the older ones, it's the gap in education last year.
Very true.
The academics part of it. I have some adolescent clients as well, and they're really feeling that academic pressure this year.
Very true. We'll talk about academics, we'll dive into emotional regulation, back to school routines, but like you're saying, anxiety is really important and trending. So we'll start there today. In terms of starting perhaps with younger children, as you mentioned, it's kind of a different way of children saying goodbye in the morning. What are some of those trends? I know in talking to both of you, talked about children kind of not knowing how to self-regulate, kind of the big cries, big emotions. Parents sometimes not able to be there to support their kids through that process at the school. So as you have experienced that both professionally and personally for yourself, Mel, I've got young children as well at home. I know yours are a bit older now. It's hard saying goodbye. Our youngest daughter, we have a nanny who kind of helps us out sometimes, and lately she said, no, the particular person's name, she's going shopping. I want mommy to stay home while my wife is supposed to kind of go and do some work. So it's hard for our daughter who's 3 to say goodbye even in the home. So I'm sure you've seen that both as a parent, but kind of in terms of supporting that at school. So there's some practical strategies that you ladies find can be helpful with supporting separation anxiety.
Absolutely. And because separation anxiety covers such a broad topic of where it's stemming from, it is important to understand that with children, they don't know how to regulate on their own.
Yeah.
They do not. So they're looking at that parent or that adult, that anchor, to be that person for them.
So true.
So when they're coming into school and they don't have anyone that they know, or because we've been in COVID for the last year and a half, there is no other adult that they've connected with to be that co-regulator.
Yeah.
Right? So they don't know how. They don't know how to transfer that. So they only see mommy and daddy as the end all be all. For you and your situation, the nanny as well, right? The nanny may be that person, but not as much because mom wants mommy. So for that self-regulation piece, we need to teach our kids.
Yeah.
It's not something they're going to learn on their own without us modeling it.
Totally.
So coming into the school, like you said, Chantel, the handoff before the parents used to hand them to the teacher and say, okay, bye, have a good day. And all of a sudden we're masked, we're at the door, it's like the quick handoff and go, 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 get into the classroom.
Yeah.
That rush and not being able to spend that time guiding and easing that child in is very difficult for a child. They can't regulate just like that. They need time to connect.
Very true.
And then once that teacher connects with them or that EA, that person, then they could start regulating and self-soothing and they can finally get the skills. But it takes practice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I had a client say to me the other day, they said, Chantel, I go to drop off my kid and I'm there for half an hour because they're crying and I feel so bad and I can't let them go. And then I see other parents just drop them off and like, see ya.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's the right thing to do?
Yeah.
And the answer is, it's very dependent.
Very
It
true.
depends on you and your relationship. But one of the key things that I tell my parents all the time that I work with is be very conscious of your nonverbals.
Yeah.
Because if
That's
you're anxious or you're trying to get out of there, kids pick up on that.
Totally.
I am a huge nerd when it comes to the brain.
Yeah.
And I think when we understand how the brain works, we can use it to our advantage.
Very true.
And so when we show up as adults and we're panicked and we're rushed, the kids feel that.
Yeah.
They can't usually articulate it, but they know that something's happening.
Yeah.
And so their mood can be off. And then for the parent that the kid's crying, they're like, what do I do? The biggest thing is that repair afterwards.
Yeah.
Because we don't always have time to sit there for a half an hour and encourage our kid to go in. And that's okay. That doesn't make you a bad parent. That doesn't make you horrible. That makes you human.
Of
You have a
course.
job to get to. You have things to do. So being able to explain the situation, always communicate when you're coming back, and then afterwards being able to repair that relationship, being able to say something like, oh, I know it was really hard leaving you this morning. It was really hard for me too. I'm glad we're back together again.
Yeah.
Being able to repair it afterwards, because I do a lot of circle of security.
Yes.
And
There we
then
go. The hands.
the hands, and
Right.
there's always going to be ruptures in relationships,
Yeah.
but the quality of the relationship depends on the quality of the repair.
That's
and
a very
that's
good
important.
statement. Say that again. The quality of the relationship depends on the
Quality of the repair.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's the building, right? It's the building of that relationship. So then the child starts learning to trust you that when you hand them off, they're still going to be okay.
Totally.
And then they could transfer that trust to another adult in the room and go, okay, my body feels off, my system feels off, but I'm looking at my mom and my mom says I'm okay. So I must be okay. So it
Yeah.
is building that trust and then transferring it over to another adult.
Yeah.
So good. When you think about anxiety, it's like, how do you feel safe, cared for, and protected? That helps calm our anxiety. The opposite's also true. We feel more anxious when we feel unsafe.
Yeah.
Things are
Absolutely.
unpredictable. We feel unprotected. And that's kind of that moment sometimes we're describing with the handoff. So
Yeah.
I thought of that circle of security visual too, right? Sometimes our children need that safe space to come into.
Yeah.
And when they have that, they actually have the bravery and confidence to go out and play. You know, the same daughter who doesn't necessarily like to be by herself or us leaving her, she'll go to the playground and find like the biggest slide and just go down it because she feels safe, she knows we're there, and she just wants to
No fear.
tackle those things.
Yeah.
And that's that picture of the circle, right? If we can create that safety, then children feel that confidence and security and support to actually go out and explore as well.
I would love to nerd out here for a second.
Go for
Please
it.
do.
There is a very brilliant research study done with mothers and infants, and it's a half of a wooden table and the rest is half plexiglass. And they have an infant at the beginning of the table
Great.
and mom's on the other end.
Yeah.
Yes.
And mom is smiling.
Yes.
The infant will crawl across the wooden part, crawl across the plexiglass, no problem.
Right.
But if mom's face looks scared, the infant will go to the end of the wooden table and not go over the plexiglass.
Isn't that telling, right? That says it all right
Yeah.
there, because they're questioning the safety. They're looking at mom. Mom, am I okay? Okay, I'm okay. I could take that chance. I could
Yeah.
take the risk.
Yeah, they look to the parent, the trusted adult, the secure adult in their life
Yeah.
to take those cues. And that's why I always go back. If anybody's ever taken a course with me or a session with me, they know I always go back to nonverbals.
Yeah.
So true.
And being able to articulate what your nonverbals mean.
That's right.
So, for example, if you're picking your child up after school and you've had a hard day, if you're like me, you're wearing it on your face.
Yeah.
That's right.
So being able to articulate to the child then, oh, you know what, how was your day? Because I had a hard day. You can
Very
probably
true.
see it on my face.
Yeah.
And just articulating to kids, because they're very egocentric in the sense that they take it on and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
you're upset with me.
That's
but
right.
really you're just wearing your day like most humans.
That's right. Yeah.
So important to just create that space, safe space to process our emotions and understand how we're doing. The idea of naming it, taming it, and helping our children kind of process what's inside coming out. There was practical strategies. Like one thing I like, being nerdy in the sense of having technology. So I've worked with kids in terms of even developing on their iPad, like, okay, what are the steps for getting ready for school, driving to school, seeing that person, they make a little iMovie of the whole bit and they watch it all the time, and it creates predictability and knowing exactly what that routine is going to look like. So there's some very practical things we can do to increase predictability, to feel more safe, to feel cared for, working in that routine at school, talking to your school counselor or a learning assistance coordinator, or perhaps a classroom support teacher, or if you're from a different school division, I work for a whole bunch, and every school board has a different name for it. So whatever yours is, call them up. They want to help and support that transition and develop a unique plan to help your child transition. But the main thing that we're talking about in terms of theme, and just to warn all of you, it's going to be a repeat theme every episode. It's all about relationship.
It is.
So if we can develop that relationship both at school and at home with our kids, that's probably one of the best strategies for everything. And we're going to unpack this in another session, but there's a great book called Connection-Based Discipline that really talks practically about how we can develop those relationships and maintain them even in challenging moments. So I encourage you to check that out, pick that up. It's a bit of a spoiler alert. We'll probably unpack in another session. I know some of you are out there probably have older children as well. So we've covered that younger children age, some practical strategies. What are we seeing in terms of maybe junior and senior high students at school these days?
Yeah, I think, again, going back to that academic pressure, feeling like they've lost a year of education.
That's it.
And it's been so hard for them, especially I have a few teens in grade 11 and 12, and coming to that, they feel like they've lost so much, and not only academically, but sports. People who've identified as a part of a team.
That's right.
They've lost that identity now, so that anxiety it really creeps in there, and it's really impacting their ability to then continue to learn.
That is so true. And I also see, adding to that, hearing the stressors of their parents.
Absolutely.
They are more aware. They have that awareness of seeing it's not just the body language, but they're hearing and they're overhearing financial issues or not being in your own home because you're misplaced or displaced because of the fire or from the flood, or, COVID is causing so much stressors in your life because you can't leave the home and dad's not working. Whatever the thing is, teenagers will wear it. They'll wear it so much, and they will internalize it and believe somehow they're to blame. And so that, coupled with the academic stress, huge. And sometimes it's not even their own, it's their parents. Their parent thinks that has this expectation of how it's supposed to be. And when it's not met, they are concerned, well, my child's not going to meet these goals on time. We have to recognize that universally, we are all in the same boat.
Very true.
All of our kids are behind because of this. All of our kids are going to have to go through that piece where we figure out that differentiated learning, we call it. So in school, teachers understand that that's part of learning. Is child A is different from child C.
Very true.
And we have to, teach accordingly. So I know as kids, as teenagers, they are worried about that. They are. But we are prepared for that as teachers, as counselors. We recognize that. So we will help validate those fears for these kids.
So true. We got anxious symptoms, and then you have the depressive symptoms too, of just being at home, being more isolated, whether it's virtual school, not being able to do the activities or things you used to do a year ago. Hopefully we're trending in the right direction in terms of being able to come back to some of those activities, but it can be hard to get back into them, So I think, again, it comes back to relationship too. How do you work with your teenager, your young adult, and say, okay, this has been a tough season, right? What do you need, and how can we support you just to kind of getting back to some things? I know there's a lot of adolescents and teenagers at my clinic where the parents are really encouraging them strongly and signing them up for a sport or activity or boxing or mixed martial arts, whatever your passion is there now, or whatever it might be, but just finding ways to re-engage. And I think that's the same thing for us as adults too. We have that anxiety, we have those depressive symptoms as well. So how do we be intentional about structuring our days to make sure we're doing things that are recharging and filling us up? As a teenager, it could be fun to go on Discord or TikTok, or whether it be video games or whatever. Those are all okay things, right? But if you're doing that for 5 hours in your room by yourself, that's not recharging. It's probably very draining.
That's a great point. I actually wanted to bring up technology because what we're seeing is that when we're using technology to that extent for that 4 to 5 hours, a lot of teenagers and even adults are using it to numb distress.
Totally.
Well, there's a lot going on in the world, so I'm going to get lost in here. But what happens when teenagers are doing that, they're not building the skills to tolerate distress.
Very true.
And so it can become compounding because they keep going into the technology. And I think we can do a session all on technology.
We should. Totally.
Yes, I'm thinking social media there and how much they're impacted by social media, right? So it's a huge piece of them and their anxiety, especially the misinformation in social media.
It's very
And
true.
you think about it, a lot of times as adults, we escape on our phones as well, and kids are seeing that.
That's right.
All right. So, and going back to the sports, I think this year is really hard because we started out this school year kind of quote unquote normal.
Right.
And then all of a sudden all these restrictions came back into place.
Back it up.
So it was kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel and then a slam door in your face.
Taking it away.
And so I think that's been really challenging. I know for myself, I can feel the heaviness.
Yeah.
And now these teenagers who have these extracurricular activities who are so hopeful, now they don't know if it's going to go ahead again. And that is a huge activity that helps them build that distress tolerance. They can escape into sports and get the body moving.
Very true.
Instead of being at home on technology. But now if everything shuts down again, they're back to that. So how then do we support parents and what's the best thing to do, I guess?
Totally. Well, let me do a lightning round here for you. 2 top strategies to support junior and senior high students. We talked about the anxiety around kind of back to school. So there's that one side of things. So one of you can pick that one. And Chantel, you kind of talked a little bit about it already. How do we find that balance between tech time? Technology can be a great tool, a half hour, an hour a night. That's great to connect with friends, FaceTime, video chat, real life people. That's wonderful, where we're actually interacting with people instead of just scrolling, which of course can be quite draining.
That's it.
So let's cover that other piece for a minute. Your child's in junior high, senior high. They're stressed about back to school, whether it's COVID, whether it's masks, whether it's feeling behind. Lightning round. Give me 2 practical strategies that we can do as parents to support our teens who are feeling that anxiety about school in particular.
Well, firstly, validate.
Totally.
Yes.
You need to validate. Say, yeah, you have every right to be feeling this way. And acknowledge your own stressors without putting them on your child, because you don't want to make it about you. But acknowledge that it's very normal to be feeling this way. So the validation piece is huge. And something practical, you've said it tons of times already, it's the connection. You need to connect, because if you're feeling stress and anxiety, you're going through all the things. Once you validated that for them and say, yeah, it really is tough, then you have to connect and say, okay, let's talk about it. Stay off the computer and just build that relationship of trust. Because once you start talking to your child, they start going, okay, maybe I could problem solve with my mom or dad. Maybe they actually can hear what I'm saying. So if you don't take that time to talk about the things that they want to talk about, they're not going to come to you about the things that you want to talk about.
So true. Starting small.
I have spent countless hours talking to kids about Minecraft.
Right.
I've never played it.
Right.
Well, I played it for an hour and I got stuck on a horse for the hour. But
There you go.
Kind of piggybacking on that, Melanie, is the fact that adolescence is a strange time
It's true.
in development. So adolescents need that independence. They're searching for that independence, but they also need that nurturing.
Totally.
And as a human being, it is very hard to be vulnerable. There are very few people, even adults, that can be vulnerable.
That's right.
So understanding your kids' signs of when they're coming in. I had one mom tell me her kid would stand up and watch her cook. And she would say, oh my goodness, why are you watching me cook? And it would be so frustrating. But that was her kid's way of trying to come in.
Right,
So when the mom understood that, she then started to invite her, hey, why don't you cut the carrots? Why? And then she would ask about her day. So kids won't often come up and say, hey, you know what? I've had a bad day.
That's a great point.
Can we talk about it?
Right.
So it's kind of like, as a parent, you're decoding behavior.
You're an investigator.
Absolutely. And we look at behaviors communication. And when you look at it that way, you start to look at it differently. So I think my advice to parents would be, start to recognize those telltale signs that your child is trying to come in. Because it's not always going to be obvious.
Very true. And this one goes global. Many of you know I'm pretty practical. So this is both for younger children, young adults, as well as adults too. Have a structure. I call it sometimes semi-structured. You don't have to plan their evening out down to the T. For younger kids, you got to be a bit more structured. For your teenagers, you can be a bit more flexible, but have a predictable time where you're eating dinner. Again, this is my wife. I got to give her credit. She's great at this. Having the same time we eat dinner every night. Sometimes I'm not home, so we try to do it 4 nights a week or 5 nights a week. But making that a priority, just having that dinner time. And some of you might be doing shift work, and that might not always be possible.
Right.
But being strategic about having a specific time where it's that connect time, whether it's cutting carrots, shooting some hoops, doing some mixed martial arts, whatever it might be. If you got to learn Minecraft, get on Discord, maybe TikTok, whatever it might be. I know a very fun thing teenagers like to do, I'm not saying I recommend it, is they like to record their parents doing embarrassing things on TikTok and then posting it. So beware of that.
Pranks.
Be aware of that, right? I saw a good one with Shaquille O'Neal and his son a while back. But anyway, develop that connect time, and then also be clear about bedtime. Whatever age your child's at, work with them to develop an agreeable time where they're shutting down their electronics, maybe half hour before it's actually time to go to bed, and having that wind down time, agree on what you feel comfortable is an appropriate amount of tech time depending on the age and stage of your kid.
Yeah.
These same principles are true for us as adults. We'll talk in a minute about stressors for parents and teachers, but I know for me, developing that routine like we talked about. For me, right away when we put the kids down, I get on my bike, my knockoff Peloton bike, and bike for 7 minutes a day. It's exactly 7 minutes. I watch a TV show for those 7 minutes, and I just feel super relaxed. It's great. So that's one thing I do. I've got a wind down time. Actually, I love my alarms. I've got ADHD, so I guess it's part of my strategies. But at I think about 8:30, 9 o'clock, people can make fun of me because I do go to bed early. Yeah, except when I'm working here. Sometimes I stay up late till like midnight doing some reports, watching some TV shows. I get binge watching, so it's not the best, but I feel like I'm doing some work, so it's kind of productive. But anyway, in terms of having that time, my alarm rings at like 9 p.m. and say, okay, it's time to wind down. So go into my room, maybe listen to some relaxing music or a podcast, do some reading, and for that half hour between like 9 and 9:30, I'm just gearing down and going to bed. And if I don't spend time doing that recharge every day, the next day I'm feeling it. Even though I got a decent sleep, I'm just exhausted. I'm kind of feeling burnt out. So just managing that day to day and having this semi-structure, I call in terms of having some of those things for ourselves and our children, I think is important.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in terms of trends for parents? Some of us are parents here working in schools with school staff. What are some of those stressors? I know, oh man, this is a tough year. Been in schools, like I said, for the past 2 weeks, and I just feel it's just so sad, for not just teachers, but probably all of us, in the world and maybe in Alberta right now.
Yeah.
It's just very sad. There's just a lot of draining stuff going on, just COVID and everything. So what are you seeing in terms of some of those demands for parents or teachers or school?
I think one thing that I've been picking up, you can sense it, you can feel it in the hallways. Totally. It's September and it's already heightened emotions. And when I think about staff, I know that teachers, I don't even know how teachers do it.
It's
like
incredible.
They are superheroes.
They are.
They really are.
Between class time and prep time and emails. And I think that's one of the things with teachers right now is it's the work after school.
Yeah.
It's all night long and it's all weekend long and they're not getting a break and then they're putting in all of this effort and then we're all stressed. Our window of tolerance in general is very low for most people and to no fault of anyone, sometimes a teacher will get an email and I hate communication in email, but then it feels daunting because they're like, I put in all this effort, I'm putting in all my time, and then I got an email about what I'm not doing.
Yes.
Right? So it's that appreciation. So one thing that we're doing in October for our staff is finding ways to show them appreciation
so good.
and
That's
gratitude
wonderful.
Because they put in so much
They
work and we all know that if we're appreciated, we're going to work harder.
That's it.
F teachers can work harder, right? So I think that's one of the things that I think I'm seeing with staff is they're putting in all this extra energy and all this extra time. But we're all so busy that I don't think it's actually getting recognized. So finding little ways to to show gratitude to a coworker.
Yes,
Very
yeah,
true.
that's a really great segue into what I was thinking, and what went through my mind is respect, and I use respect in my kids, my own children, students I've worked with, and in the work atmosphere. And if you're not feeling respected and appreciated for what you do,
Yeah.
you're not going to give your best, right? And we're all feeling very depleted. So
Yeah.
when you're feeling depleted, you need to recharge, like Joel's saying about his evening activity. But if our teachers have classrooms that are significantly bigger, which we're seeing this year, is they are bigger in size because of cutbacks, and we're not going to have a conversation about that because that'll take us down a rabbit hole.
Great.
But the reality of it is teachers have more on their plates.
Yeah.
And then they're expected to do this in the evening, like you said, which is crossing boundaries, which is a difficult thing if you're trying to have structure in your evenings to kind of take a break free from it all and just kind of relax. So teachers have these expectations, and then it's just expected. There's no respect or appreciation to go, you know, I get it. Your evenings are full. So I think it does come back to, from a teacher's perspective, I agree with you, Chantel. That is huge. Teachers' plates are so full and it's never ending. They can't take time for themselves, because if they do, something is happening, like an email, an irate parent, or maybe an irate person, or somebody's upset with them about something, and everything they did that was wonderful for planning gets set to the side to deal with the negative piece. So teaching, supporting them is a huge piece of this, because they're holding our children on a daily basis. So we really have to work on that.
So true. Thank you to teachers, educational
Oh, we love you.
professionals, yeah,
We
for all the
love
work you do. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Appreciate it.
And that idea like about pain or stress, you know, without purpose leads to hopelessness. We get discouraged, we can feel down, we can feel depressed. It just feels like darkness, you know. But finding purpose in the process. I'm not sure there's much purpose, you know, and sometimes some of the challenges we're facing right now. But what is the purpose in the process? What is the light at the end of the tunnel that we're moving towards? You know, I talked earlier in the intro episode about being a football coach. So one of my favorite football coaches is Tony Dungy. Love the guy, and he talks about the importance of vision. It ignites passion and it inspires us to do what we need to do to accomplish certain goals. It's hard to have vision at this particular juncture in time, in our schools, in our lives, and yet it's so important. You know, so I love driving sometimes, and driving the mountains. Maybe I love it a little bit too much. I joke with my wife, I want to be a professional race car driver. She begs me and says, no, please don't. But sometimes I also get a little bit enjoying the scenery too much. And let's say if you're driving the mountains, let's say around Banff or BC or something, you start looking at the scenery and all of a sudden you're almost off the road. So my wife's like, Joel, keep your eyes on the road. Stay focused ahead.
What you're saying, though.
Right?
Yes.
And there's so many distractions. There's so many peripheral things going on, whether it's media, social media, the news. It's important to stay informed, of course, right? And what's going on, and being safe and being aware. But there's a lot of just peripheral stuff that if we focus on it, we just get off the road, get into the ditch, and you just crash, right?
That's right?
It's very hard to get back on the road. So having vision in terms of what are we moving towards in this season? What are my hopes? Not that this season's great or that we're loving it, but what is something that we're coming out of it, you know? And I think one thing, even for me, the last month or two, it's been a kind of a weird season for a number of reasons. But this podcast, you know, I always like to feel like I'm moving forward, like something's kind of inspiring and we're doing something. So this podcast, thank you to you two. This is just a lot of fun hanging out. It's inspiring. It's something that you feel like is giving you a sense of purpose and giving you a sense of helping or giving back. You know, so for each of us, that looks different. I just encourage you, what is that vision? What is something practical right in front of you that you can hone in on it and focus in on this season, in this particular season, that's going to give you a little bit of purpose. One thing for me too, it's my daughter. She's going to be heading into kindergarten shortly here in a little bit. I love teaching her. I'm a teacher at heart, so I love being able to teach her reading and math. And she says, Dad, can we do some reading? Can we do some math? She's not even in school yet. I'm a teacher, really. I go all out. And that inspires me because I have a purpose in helping my kids. My little one developing some other skills in the second one. So developing that purpose, I think, is so key for all of us. You know, whether it's a teenager or an adult, a teacher, a parent, whatever we are in this season, how do we find purpose in our parenting, purpose in our teaching, and just purpose in our just everyday life.
And I think an important part of that as well, Joel, is making sure that it's small steps.
Exactly.
Not making these big vision and goals. Like, as much as I would love to say I want to change the world, and I do.
That's right.
I can't do that overnight.
Totally.
So dividing it up into small attainable steps. And I think if I had to leave parents, staff, humans in general with one tip and one message of advice is give yourself grace.
So good.
Have some self-compassion
Yeah.
and be kind to yourself, because realistically, we're all struggling right now.
That's it.
We're all going through something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the hardest, and let me know if I'm wrong, but I think that the hardest part sometimes is the expectations we put on ourselves.
Very
That's
true.
it.
Yeah.
And just because, and we're going through all of this, but we still have such high expectations.
Yeah.
So giving ourselves grace
Yeah.
in those moments. And again, going back to that repair, because you're going to lose it some days. Let's be honest. We're all humans. We lose it. We get upset.
Of course.
Our emotions may get the best of us sometimes, especially with everything going on.
Yeah.
But be able to give yourself grace, own it, and go back and repair what you need to repair.
Yeah.
Take ownership and responsibility and talk it out, because this is a hard time for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and we all need a little grace.
That idea of grace and self-compassion is so important. So Kristen Neff, she's got some great tools on it, but one question she asked in an exercise is, what would a caring, kind friend say? Don't just think about it. I've got some homework for our listeners here if you're open to it. Ask 5 people what they appreciate most about you. Because when I hit the wall, when I hit those
I like
tough
it.
moments, I've actually done this with Mel. She
Yeah.
knows I asked her one time, so I was
Yeah.
hitting a wall. And I said, oh, I'm just doing, something for work here, a little personal development project. I just need to ask 5 people, to just describe me in words. So you can do it very chill and not awkward or weird. And that's what I did. And the responses you get back are so important. But it also is very grounding, because it creates a vision, it paints a picture of who you are and what you're about. Because it can be easy to lose ourselves in what's important this season. But when I have a hard day or a tough moment, I come back to those core things, the grace perspective that other people have. Because I might not be the best at organizing papers, or I might not be the best at doing certain things, but there's some things that each of us are really good at.
Love it.
So
I
we
think-
need other people to remind us of that,
Yeah.
I think as a family, that will be a good challenge.
Yeah.
right?
What you appreciate and love about each of your family members,
That's
and you can
wonderful.
always look back on it.
Yeah,
It's
what
very
we
true.
do at Thanksgiving and at all holidays where we're sitting is thankful about something in the family. It has to be specific to the family, but
Yeah.
it helps us kind of hone in on what special skills and talents and lovely things about attributes of each other are,
Love
It's wonderful. That makes a lot of sense, and it brings me to the thought of giving grace is such a huge piece of this, but the other piece of this is front loading when we can have time to think about it, not in the moments of stress. Because we
Yes.
can't make these decisions in stress moments.
Very
We have
true.
to have those conversations to ourselves, to our family, in moments of calm. So having a plan in those calm moments will help you carry it through to the more difficult moments.
Yeah.
So
That's
true.
huge.
So true.
Especially with kids, being able to have that communication.
Absolutely.
I remember as a kid, the one thing I hated that my mom said was, because I said so.
Right?
No, communicate with
Mhm.
kids. Let them know why there's a limit in place. And it's
Yeah.
often safety.
Yeah.
But letting them know, because to this day I still bug my mom about it, and I'll say it back to her, because I said so.
Right.
That's fine.
Right. And there's a mutual respect there, right? If you don't respect your children, how are they supposed to respect you? And that carries into their teenage and adult life. If you're not respecting them and giving them the answers, how are they going to respect you? It works both ways.
Yeah.
And it's so key. That's so important to respect ourselves too. Is setting limits for
That's it.
ourselves, for our children, recognizing when we're at capacity or our cup is full, so to speak. That is such a prerequisite of emotional regulation, because we don't get angry just out of randomness or because we're angry. No, our cup is building. The balloon is filling up. We're getting stressed, and eventually it pops or bursts.
Yeah.
So in terms of managing our own emotions and managing the emotions, helping our children manage their emotions as well, developing that awareness of when we're kind of just filling it up, getting stressed, and being able to say no and have those boundaries and support ourselves that way. So
that
that's,
brings me back to one practical
yes, I love it.
skill that I want to tell
Let's land on
parents
that.
Yeah.
is emotional awareness. Because
Yeah.
everybody jumps to emotion regulation, but you
Yes.
can't regulate what you're not aware of.
That's right.
Exactly.
So being able to teach children a vocabulary.
That's
Mhm.
right.
Even getting a printout of different emotions,
You
and
got
when
it.
your kid's in a mood, you can say, what are you feeling right now?
That's
and
it.
you can go through the list, and they'll be able to identify
Of course.
which one resonates with them. But being able to build that awareness, because I even have adult clients who say, I'm angry, happy, or sad.
And they
And
only
that
have
is,
the 3.
Right.
that's it.
That's it.
all they have. So in order to regulate emotions, we need to be aware of them.
So
So
name
true.
it to tame it.
Exactly.
Right?
Dan Siegel, I
That's
love
right.
him.
Right.
Name it to tame it. We need to understand the emotion. We need to name it in order for us to conquer it, figure it out, work through it.
And that's not
Get
just
skills.
for kids, that's for
That's
us as adults as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I promise you this, listeners, we are going to do a whole podcast on emotional regulation, emotional awareness, emotional expression, all that stuff, and unpack it in detail. We also want your feedback. So what did you think about today's podcast? What was helpful? What was supportive? We want to hear that. And we really want to hear in terms of helpful topics we want to cover this year. We're going to cover emotional regulation. We're going to cover ADHD. We're going to cover anxiety in some more detail, depression, supporting the mental health of teenagers. We'll probably get into, like we talked about, technology, some other special topics as well. But this podcast, it is Your Mental Health Matters. So it's all about you. It's about hearing what is important in terms of supporting your mental health and how we can journey as a team to support that. I'm so thankful for the both of you. I feel encouraged in my mental health just hanging out with both of you. Great people just to chat and share life with, as well as being able to talk about real life practical support. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. Stay tuned. We'll be putting out episodes probably about once a month. So check it out probably the beginning of each month. And as we launch season 1, we look very forward to your feedback and so thankful that you tuned in today. I've got one final question I want to ask each of you, and perhaps you listeners at home too. What is one thing you want to do this month to journey and support your mental health? It can be great to listen to podcasts. I love listening to podcasts, different ideas, but how do we make it practical? How do we kind of land on something that we're going to take home and do every day or integrate into our daily life for the next 30 days until we meet again? So who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Okay.
This has actually been kind of my goal going back into this school year, because I knew it was going to be hard. I knew it was going to be challenging. So my goal is taking time to take care of myself each day.
Nice.
And as I said before, anything worth doing is worth doing a little.
Okay.
So even if it's 5 minutes a day, it's something for me. And not for me where it feels like a chore. Like, I'm going to be honest, working out feels like a chore for me.
Yes.
That's not relaxing for me.
Yeah.
Sure.
But reading a book, learning, that is my go-to. So even if it's 5 minutes a day, making time for me.
Cool. Is that going to be at a specific time, or is it kind of vary depending on your day list?
Well, it depends on my work schedule, because anybody who takes sessions with me know that I work really random hours throughout the week. But typically I like to do it before bed. And Joel, I am very similar to you. My bedtime is 9 p.m.
Right. There you go.
Yes. I'm older than both of you. How am I going to bed later? So something I want to take from this, actually, connection with my kids and my husband, because it really fills my bucket. And even if it is for just 5 minutes, like Chantel said, connecting, because I have 5 kids, connecting with each of them individually, and even if it's just 5-minute conversation, which gives me 5, 10, 35,
it adds up.
It does add up. So my evening is literally spent with connecting, and it may be a quick topic, it may be something that they love, but it fills me so much when I lock eyes with my child or my husband, and we just have a moment of understanding. I go, okay, and it grounds me. So that's something I really want to focus on, because whenever I start spinning, I need to be grounded again, and my family can ground me when I'm connecting with them.
So
love
good.
that.
I love both of yours. I'm going to steal both of them, and I'll definitely use those, but I also have to go next level and think of my own idea too. So I think one thing, digging deep, I'm going to do what both of you suggested, because I kind of do those things already and they're really important, is for the next 30 days, I'm going to try to go outside for 5 minutes a day. Before the weather gets cold, I love fall. I just really, really love being outside. So I try to make it a priority this time of year to get outside for 5 minutes. And for you listeners, whether it was something that stood out today that we talked about that you want to incorporate into your daily routine, or maybe it's something else you've heard that's just super important, I encourage you to set a timer, write it down, share the goal with a friend. So it's small, it's measurable, and there's like practical ways that people are going to strongly encourage you to follow through on that too. So thanks so much for listening to Your Mental Health Matters, and we look forward to connecting again next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Please reach out to us if you have questions or comments about today's topic, or questions or suggestions for future topics. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, we encourage you to reach out to local agencies for support, as our podcast is not a substitute for counseling. If you require immediate support, please contact the crisis line or your local hospital.